Welcome and good afternoon to Let's Talk Business. We're talking about location today, finding the ideal site for your business. I have George Smith and Sarah Schelling with me. I'll be giving you a little bit more information about them in a moment. First, I'd like to start a little bit about what the Women's Business Center is and why we do Let's Talk Business. The Washington Center for Women in Business is funded in part by the Small Business Administration to be one of the Women's Business Centers. Our goal is to help women who are either trying to start a business, launch that business successfully, or if they're already in business, how can we help get you to your next milestone, whether it's hiring a new employee, beefing up your marketing and sales, your revenues in general. We host a lot of workshops either online like this one or in person, but then do a lot of one-on-one coaching and mentoring that way so that we can gear that information specifically to you. We cover the entire state of Washington, but are located physically in Lacey, Washington. If you'd like to meet with us, the first time is free. It's $25 a session after that. However, if for some reason that $25 a session is a barrier to you, we do have scholarships available. My name is Tracy Hansen, and my contact information is on the screen there, as well as our business coach, Christine Buckley. Or if you'd like to schedule an appointment, you can contact Ryan Norskog, our office coordinator. Now with that, I'm really excited to have you guys here today. Our presenters are going to be George Smith and Sarah Schelling. So George, after earning his bachelor's degree from Florida Atlantic University in Boca Raton, Florida, George spent the first 20 years of his career in the banking industry, specialized in working with and lending to small businesses in Florida and Washington. Like many community bankers, George volunteered his time with nonprofit organizations that were involved in economic development, which is how he found his true calling as a professional economic developer. After earning his MBA from Eastern Washington University in Spokane, he worked for 3 years as an economic development leader with the Council of Governments in Oregon, and then worked for 12 years as an economic developer with the City of Fresno, California, where he earned his 2 professional certifications. George has been the City of Lacey's Economic Development Coordinator since October 2014. Sarah has a bachelor's degree in Community, Environment, and Planning, as well as a Master of Urban Design and Planning with a focus in land use and hazard mitigation from the University of Washington. After receiving her master's degree, Sarah spent 3 years working for the Federal Emergency Management Agency as a floodplain manager in the National Flood Insurance Program. While with FEMA, she was deployed around the country a number of times to work as a disaster response coordinator following federally declared disasters. Deployments include work to Florida during the 2004 hurricane season when 4 hurricanes impacted the state, and in 2005 to Mississippi as part of the response efforts related to Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. After getting her fill of southern summers, she left FEMA and has been a land use planner for the City of Lacey for the last 12 years. Sarah works with local citizens and developers on issues related to land use planning, including, among other things, zoning, design review, permitting, subdivisions, and commercial site plan reviews. Sarah is certified by the American Institute of Certified Planners. With that, I will let you guys take it away.
Thank you.
Thanks. And if you want to change the slides there, you can just use that button there.
Or hit enter.
Or enter.
Okay.
Maybe
not. Oh, that did it. Okay. Well, what you see in front of you now is some basic information on Sarah. Sarah, why don't you talk a little bit about what you do?
Sure. So I am a senior land use planner for the City of Lacey. I've worked with the city or for the city for the last 12 years. And generally speaking, I am a current planner versus a long-range planner. And what a current planner does is work with property owners, business owners, developers on development projects throughout the City of Lacey. Not only do I work with developers, I also work with citizens answering questions relating to zoning, setbacks, tree removals, permits, and I also work with businesses to ensure sites that they're considering are going to work for their use, review things like zoning, land use, site design, and development.
And I can tell you also, Sarah is a subject matter expert that elected officials and staff rely on heavily, both staff within the city and with other public agencies. I know not a week goes by that I don't end up in Sarah's office asking her about whether a business can do a certain type of activity in a certain area, and Sarah always knows the answer and knows how to be able to make things work. As a professional economic developer, I work with entrepreneurs, elected officials, staff, and community partners to foster an environment where businesses can thrive. I'm responsible for business attraction, retention, and expansion. I work with entrepreneurs and business owners in all aspects of successfully conducting business in Lacey. So I work with businesses and entrepreneurs that are looking for assistance with site location, access to capital, and as well as business advocacy. Business advocacy is kind of a big thing. It can be really anything where an entrepreneur or business interfaces with the city, and sometimes even with another governmental agency, where there's an obstacle that we need to try to figure out how to work around. So, with apologies to the creators of Lost in Space and the friendly robot, warning, warning, danger, danger. Do not execute a lease or a purchase agreement until you determine that the site that you're considering is viable, that the zoning permits your type of business, that your business will fit, and the cost of any required modifications are within your budget. So viable is a big topic. Viable is different things for different businesses. Certainly you don't want to be buying or spending money to lease a lot more space than you need, but at the same time, you need to have an adequate amount of space for your business as it is now and as you anticipate it'll be over the coming few years. You also need to be cognizant of the type of business you have and the type of location that you need. So if yours is a retail type of business or restaurant where you're really dependent on the public being able to easily find you, to be able to build top of mind awareness because the public sees you every day as they travel by, then you're going to probably need to pay top dollar for a location in a commercial area where you're going to have great visibility. At the same time, if yours is a business that isn't reliant on that type of exposure, then you can be off the beaten path and you may be able to have a lower cost of either rent or to finance the purchase of your site. Sometimes businesses will, in an effort to try to save money on their site, will, even though they need a really good visible site, will go kind of off the beaten path and end up paying very dearly for that in the need to do extensive advertising. If they don't have the funds to do that advertising, what ends up happening is you really need to think about the value in terms of what you're getting, not just how much space you're getting for the dollar that you're spending, but also what that really means to your business, if you've got the exposure you need, if you need that type of exposure or not. Zoning is a really big issue, and Sarah's going to talk more about that in a moment. But also you need to make sure that your business will fit. And it's not just can you get all of your stuff and your customers and your employees into the inside of the business, but do you have adequate parking for the number of employees you're going to have, as well as the customers that you're hopefully going to have? Do you have access for ingress and egress for folks to be able to get in, but also for deliveries or for folks picking up things? If yours is the type of business where you're going to be shipping products out, is there adequate room to be able to get the type of delivery trucks and transportation vehicles in to drop off stuff and to pick up stuff safely? And finally, the cost of required modifications, do they fit your budget? If you're leasing space, you may find that the more expensive space may actually be a better value than the less expensive space if it more appropriately fits your business. But also, if you're going to need to make modifications to the building, the more expensive space, that landlord may be willing to either provide a discount on rent for a period of time to cover some of your costs, or they may have an allowance for tenant improvements, which will help cover your costs to do the improvements that you need to make. But you also need to be aware not only of the needs or the improvements that you need for your business to be successful and to look nice and appropriate for your type of business, but also be aware that there may be some regulatory requirements as well, whether it's related to ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, or whether it's related to something else in terms of improved business and improved and enhanced building codes that may require expensive modifications that you may not have considered. And a really good example of this, imagine, if you will, in Lacey, think about the intersection of College and Yelm Highway. So College is kind of the main north-south route. In fact, right after Yelm Highway, it changes names and it goes all the way down to Rainier. So it's very heavily trafficked. Great traffic counts. Yelm Highway, also very, very heavily traveled, goes all the way from Yelm toward Lacey, past the Amtrak station, and continues on into Olympia and then into Tumwater, where it actually changes names. So you've got a signalized intersection at the corner of Yelm Highway and College. So if you imagine that intersection, so on the northeast corner, you've got a grocery store anchored shopping center. You've got a very, very busy Safeway. You've got a Burger King in the out parcel. You've got a number of restaurants and other retail businesses in there. Very, very active. Grocery store anchored businesses or shopping centers tend to draw lots of visitors almost every day because groceries are a necessity. On the southeast corner, that's residential. Crossing over to the southwest corner, you've got another grocery store anchored shopping center. You've got the QFC grocery store. You've got the Rite Aid pharmacy right on the corner. You've got an auto parts store, which tends to get a lot of business. You've got other stores and services in there. There's a car wash. There's an oil change facility. There's even a McDonald's in there, which is so busy that it actually has a double drive-through. So you've got great activity there. And then across Yelm Highway on the northwest corner, you've got a huge Lowe's and then a very, very nice shopping area that has services, has restaurants, Starbucks, very, very nice area. So you would think, looking at that, if I was going to open a business that was retail, let's say I wanted to open a gas station. In fact, there's no gas stations at that intersection. A signalized intersection with that level of traffic going both ways across both roads, gosh, it would seem like it would be just a natural place to have a gas station, and it would seem like the zoning would allow it. In fact, there's lots of places where Safeways actually have gas stations in their parking lots. So if you wanted to open a gas station, it would seem like it'd be a slam dunk. You wouldn't even have to ask a question. It'd be a great place to open a gas station. Sarah, would the zoning there allow a gas station?
Zoning does allow a gas station.
Great. So does that mean I could open a gas station there?
Actually, there are some other considerations that you have to think about with that area. So you should come to the city and talk with someone, because what actually is there is that area is actually in the location of what's called a 1-year time of travel for a city well. And if you're just looking at the zoning map for the city, you wouldn't know that the 1-year time of travel zone is actually across those parcels. And that extra zone, or that 1-year time of travel zone, actually prohibits the use or the location of gas stations because it has potential impact to a city's well system.
So that would be something that you really need to consider, not only for a gas station, but perhaps some other types of retail businesses that might have some hazardous materials associated with them, like a dry cleaner or something like that.
Exactly.
That also might get in the way.
Exactly.
So it sounds like the thing that you want to do first before you execute any kind of a lease purchase or a lease agreement or a purchase agreement would be to contact a friendly, knowledgeable, and helpful planner. Someone like Sarah or her colleagues at the city. And I can tell you, as an economic developer, these are conversations that take place all the time. These people really know their business. They're not looking for ways to preclude your business. On the contrary, they're looking for ways to be able to help you get into a location that'll work for you, but at the same time, we would rather face an obstacle early in the process than have a really unpleasant surprise later on. So I'm going to stop talking for a while and let Sarah talk a little bit.
Okay. So thanks, George. What do planners do to help your businesses once you have a site in mind? There's a few things. First and foremost, we can help you identify a particular use or the zones in which your particular use can locate. If you go to the city prior to finding a location, we can actually help you identify across the zoning districts within the city where you may locate. If you actually go to the city after you have a use a spot or a location, in mind, you've found a spot, you think you want to locate there, it would be perfect, like this place down on Yale Highway. The planner can help determine whether or not that use would actually be permitted in that zone. It's very important to check which land use zone, check the land use zones prior to signing any kind of lease or making any kind of building purchase, because most cities have a varied number of commercial zones throughout their jurisdiction which allow different types of uses. The types of uses and what are permitted or not is often determined by the potential impacts of those uses on adjacent pre-existing uses. So if you have a use that generates an offensive odor or excessive noise, for example, it's probably not going to be permitted immediately adjacent to a single-family home. We have lots of zones throughout the city that are located, commercial zones located immediately adjacent to single-family zones or near light industrial areas where there are more use restrictions. That being said, there are many businesses that translate very well across multiple commercial zoning designations. A salon or a clothing store, for example, can generally be located in many different commercial zoning districts because the impacts associated with those are generally limited. They generate a lower volume of traffic, maybe operate during normal business hours, so they'd be unlikely to have negative impacts on adjacent homes or other types of businesses. An auto repair shop or a very busy drive-through restaurant, on the other hand, would likely not have quite as many options for zones in which to locate because they may be incompatible with existing uses. So we can help you at the planning department save some time by pointing you in the right direction in terms of zones to focus on. We can also help you identify other issues related to a particular site that may be of concern. We can talk about things like signage, about landscaping requirements, parking requirements, and then answer any other site questions that you might have. And we can do all those things at the counter. We can also provide what we call a pre-submission conference. And at the City of Lacey, these things are free, and these are things that we highly recommend and in some cases encourage if you're proposing a new building, if you're moving into a building or thinking of moving into a building that is a change of use at the site or an intensification of use at a current commercial site, such as turning an auto parts store into maybe a daycare, for example. That would potentially be, that's a change of use, definitely, and an intensification of use, potentially, that's going to require some additional things other than a business license just to move in. Or if the location that you select needs improvements or has been empty for a certain amount of time, you're going to need to come in and talk to the city and make sure that building in that location is up to current standards. And you would do that at a pre-submission conference. At the conference, the planning department, the building department, and the public works department will all be present to answer any questions you have, as well as to go through any requirements that might be associated with your use and identify any items that you might not have considered that could add some significant cost to your project. Often, if you're moving into a space, somewhere in a mall, a strip mall, or into a space where the use was the same or very similar to what you are planning on doing, you could move in with just a business license, and we can share that with you at a pre-submission conference, and often just at the counter. However, if you're making exterior changes, converting a building to an entirely new use or building new, you're going to require a land use approval, and that's going to have certain requirements associated with it. Some of those things might include ensuring that utilities are installed to the site, the water and sewers that serve the building. There are going to be potential requirements for things like frontage improvements, and by that I mean sidewalks, curbs, gutters, planter strips. Those types of things can potentially be added with land use projects. And then one of the big things that kind of jumps up and surprises a lot of people, especially small business owners, are traffic mitigation fees, which are generally associated with new uses, and really, as I said, can cost a significant amount of money and take people by surprise. Applicants for daycare centers, particularly, and drive-through coffee shops are often quite surprised by these fees. And just another thing to note about traffic mitigation fees, even a change of use without significant improvements to your building can trigger requirements for traffic mitigation fees. Sometimes these can be minimal, but asking about these up front and getting an estimate is a really important part of your planning process, and these are things that also can be addressed at your pre-submission conference. Traffic fees themselves are generally based on the number of vehicular trips that visit a particular use during the PM peak. So the PM peak are hours between 4 and 6 p.m. And some uses certainly generate a significantly higher number than others. I'm going to go back to daycares again because Daycare centers and drive-through restaurants are typically the highest generators and have significant fees associated with them. Drive-through coffee shops and daycare centers are, a lot of small business owners are trying to start those types of uses and find that the traffic mitigation fees can really hinder their progress in moving forward. There is a potential way to avoid some of these fees. Sometimes, if you can find a building or an existing building where the use was the same or very similar in terms of the number of vehicular trips associated with that building are the same as what yours would be, you may be able to avoid most, if not all, of the traffic mitigation fees. In Lacey, we've had a daycare center move into a building that was previously used as a high-volume restaurant, and she was able to avoid mitigation fees because that previous restaurant generated as many or more trips than she had and had already paid for the trips. And so she was able to vest those trips associated with it and avoid the traffic mitigation fees. So that's one of the things, too, when you're looking for a site and thinking about types of fees that might be associated with it. If you could find a place where use was similar before or had a similar number of trips, it might be beneficial to you. This situation of the daycare isn't always possible, but it's definitely worth investigating. In terms of other jurisdictions with pre-submission conferences, most seem to have that service available. The cost is going to vary. As I mentioned, in Lacey, there's no cost associated with it, and we're always happy to offer that service to new applicants.
And as far as if a small business wanted to find out what the traffic was of the previous business, do they just ask a planner, or is there a place that they can go to look those kind of numbers up?
They would likely just call us at the city. We can direct you to our transportation department, and they do keep records of uses on sites and whether or not a particular use would be vested under the existing trips associated with that site. When you're moving into an existing building, oftentimes those trips are vested. New buildings are where we often see big problems, or when it's a significant change of use, like a daycare moving into a small retail shop and really expanding. Like I said, daycares generate tons of trips in the PM peak that a lot of other uses just don't. But we do have resources in our transportation department to help answer those questions. And also at the pre-submission conference, we have what we call a traffic generation worksheet. When you apply for your pre-submission conference, you fill out that worksheet, and we can give you information on potential trips at the pre-submission conference as well.
Great. And I know that those are free in the City of Lacey. Do you know at all in the rest of the state of Washington, are those generally free to low cost, or is that something
I think it actually varies widely across jurisdictions. I actually believe the county does pre-submission conferences, Thurston County does, and they go, I believe, almost up to $1,000 just for the pre-submission conference. So you're not even submitting an application. So it is going to vary widely across jurisdictions in the state. We do think there are a fair number that provide them at a low cost.
Okay.
And Sarah, you mentioned the traffic, and I know that from previous experience that can be an unexpected and not good news for a new business going in. So if a business was thinking about going into a relatively new shopping center where perhaps no store had been before, and they were going to do something that was going to generate a high volume of PM peak traffic, such as a daycare center, doesn't the developer who built the shopping center have to have already paid for the traffic impact, or is that something that would be the responsibility of the business going in?
It does vary. The developer, for instance, the Britton Plaza commercial property up on Britton and Marvin Road, what they did with their application, that's a large development. I can't quite remember the square footage of all the buildings, but they submitted a traffic impact analysis, and they did a very general use code with their traffic study that showed they generated a certain number of trips. Prior to building permit issuance is when trips have to be, when you have to pay for your trips. So they are building, that developer in particular is building when he has users. So he does pass that fee on to whoever that user, whoever he's building that building for, he will pass that on to the user. Some developers if they want to build all at once, they'll have to cover those costs all at one time when the building permit is issued. And then how they pass that on to their lessees, I'm not sure how that's done. Maybe somehow in their leases it would be done. They pass on that expense. Oftentimes, when you're doing just a general retail code to assess the number of trips you have over a large development, when you actually have the uses come in, you're going to exceed the number of trips and then have to pay above and beyond that initial amount of traffic mitigation fees that were paid for that site.
So those are things then that when a business or an entrepreneur who's thinking of opening a business would need to take into consideration when they're evaluating potential sites. So again, it may be a situation where a site that has a much higher lease rate may actually end up being a better value than one that has a much lower lease rate if the one with the lower lease rate is going to have some additional costs that may not be obvious at the beginning.
Absolutely.
Another good reason to come and talk to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What I'm showing you now is a startup guide that we developed. We did this in partnership with the State of Washington Department of Commerce. And this one is set up for restaurants. And there's a couple reasons for this. First of all, restaurants in Lacey, and in fact in almost nearly every city in the United States, the number one type of restaurant that's opened, the number one type of business that's opened is a restaurant. So this was a way to reach the folks most likely to need it. And in many cases, folks opening up restaurants may be new to the area, they may be new to business. So that's why we developed this. But one of the things that's useful about this, even if you're not thinking about a restaurant or a food-related business, is probably half to 2/3 of the things that are applicable to restaurants in deciding on a location is applicable really to any type of business. So this is really a useful tool to use if you're early in the stages of thinking about a location, or even if you're before that, if you're in the early stages of thinking about opening a business. This is something you can use to kind of get you to think through. What we tried to outline here, there's an old saying, it's not what you don't know that'll get you, it's what you don't know that you don't know. And this is designed to kind of help you to be aware of those things that you don't know that you don't know. The other thing I would very strongly advise you to do, if you've not done so already, is make contact with the Thurston Economic Development Council, the EDC. They offer an array of services for entrepreneurs and for business owners that can really help you, whether you're starting a new business from scratch or whether you're in business and you're ready to make the next big leap, to be able to really help you to stack the deck for your success. So if you're thinking about you want a site, where would you go to find one? Well, my recommendation would be go to the City of Lacey's Economic Development website, which is www.locationlacey.com. The three most important considerations in anything to do with real estate is location, location, location. So we think that location, location, Lacey makes sense. So we would invite you to come here, and what you will see is on our landing page, you will see 4 boxes, and I've got where it says click here in red, is a place where you can look and find sites that are available. These are sites that are available for sale or for lease. So you click on that, there'll be a second link that you'll click on, and it'll take you to this screen. So at this screen, you can determine if you want to look for something that's for sale or if you want to look at something that's for lease. And by selecting one or the other, it'll immediately filter out everything that doesn't meet the criteria that you're seeking. If you're kind of open to either one, then just leave it blank, and everything that's for sale or for lease within your category will show up. The next thing, I'm afraid with my screen print I cut off part of it, but you've got 3 types of real estate, commercial real estate to look at. You've got office, industrial, or retail. So let's say that you were looking for a retail space and you wanted to lease it, and you wanted to be in Lacey, and you also knew you don't want 100,000 square feet. You're looking for something between 1,000 and 1,500 square feet. Less than 1,000 is too small. More than 1,500, you're paying rent on more space than you need. As you can see right above the shorter of the 2 arrows, you see size and maximum size. So you can actually select out everything that doesn't meet your criteria. So you could put in 1,000 as a minimum and 1,500 as your maximum. You'd click on search, and what you would see would be a complete listing of everything that's for lease in Lacey, that's retail, that's available, that's between 1,000 and 1,500 square feet. And this happens to be just the first one that came up, and it provides you with some basic information. So you can see it's for lease. You can see it's for lease for $28 a square foot. You can see the building size. It's a big complex. So it's not like, you know, a little building just sitting out in the field somewhere. It's a relatively new building. It was built in 2013. 0 parking spaces doesn't mean there's no parking. In this case, it just means that there are none that are specifically assigned to space that you're looking at. Excuse me. It talks about the zoning, and it gives you the contact information for the broker that has it. And in fact, if you were to scroll down, that's a little bit more of a description, and it even has a link on there that'll take you to the marketing flyer that has some additional useful information. So besides finding a site, this tool helps you to see what's available. It helps you to formulate your budget. So if you're early in the process and you're trying to think, I think I want to go into this business, I think I've got enough cash that I've put together, I've kind of put the arm on friends and family, so I've got some money to start my business, but I need to be able to develop a budget in terms of, you know, what my sales will be, what my costs will be, what my profit will be, so how much will my rent be, so you can figure that out. So this helps you formulate your budget. And in the process of looking at all the sites that come up, it helps you formulate your questions so that when you talk to a realtor or a leasing agent or a property manager, that you are well informed and you know the questions to ask. You can ask such things as exact terms. What does triple net mean versus net? It helps to determine if there's going to be any kind of any allowance for tenant improvements, and what the common area maintenance costs are, and things of that nature. So it's something that can be very useful, but there's more. So this is the screen print that I showed you a moment ago. This is for the same parcel, and it's just the top of the screen. And as you can see where I've got the arrow pointing, there's a lot of additional information available, and one of them is demographics. So if you click on that, there's a whole treasure trove of demographics based on how things are now in 2017, but also 5 years out from now. So you can see if I were to take my business and go into this location, this is the makeup of the population now, and this is what it's forecast to be 5 years from now. And it's not just how many people there are, but it gives you an age distribution. It gives you lots of other information. It gives you income distribution. It even gives you gender, and it gives you ethnicity. And that can be very important to you depending on the type of business you've got. So when I've worked with businesses in the past that are looking, especially larger businesses, that have a very clear idea of who their customers are, you know, they know that they need customers within a certain age range. People below that age range just don't seem to be interested in their product. People above a certain age range just don't seem to be interested in their product. It may be that they need a certain income level, maybe high, maybe low, maybe in the middle, but they don't necessarily draw people across the board. When I was doing economic development in California, an area which is extremely ethnically diverse, one of the things that I learned in working with my customers was they had some very specific ethnic requirements. So if they had an ethnic type of product that appealed to a specific ethnicity, it might also be a product that was well received by members of some other ethnicities, but not of others. So it was really important for them to have a very clear idea that there were enough people of the right age, of the right ethnicities, and of the right income levels to be able to be a good match for their particular goods or services that they offered. So this information is available to you. I would also call your attention to the extreme upper right-hand corner where you see it says radius and it shows a 10 in there. The other thing that you can do with this is you can change it. So if you wanted a larger radius or a smaller radius, you can do that. But what's even more valuable is the box next to it. Rather than using a radius, if you use drive time, retail businesses especially are much more interested now in drive time than they are in radiuses. So if yours is the type of business that you know, or for example, if you're thinking about doing something where you're going to be working as a franchisee, your franchisor may have, excuse me, some very specific suggestions to you in terms of, for your customers, they're not going to drive more than 20 minutes to get to you. So it's going to be very important to know if within a 20-minute drive time, if you've got the number and the type and the income levels of customers that you're going to need to be successful. You can adjust it up, you can adjust it down. Some people will come farther or drive longer to come to your business, depending on one type of business versus another. If you've got a convenience store, 10 minutes may be the limit in terms of drive time before people are just going to go someplace else. So that information is all available to you at www.locationlacey.com.
And now, can they only look up information on Lacey properties on that site, or?
It defaults to Lacey. It does have the ability to look elsewhere in Thurston County, but really, why would anyone want to?
Right, exactly. If you are hoping to find a tool like that and you're outside of Thurston County, just let us know, and we can reach out to some of the other economic development councils to see if they have tools like that in your location.
I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the other regulatory items and maybe some other opportunities for your business as you move forward in searching for a location. I want to talk about signage briefly. You'll always want to make sure to review your jurisdiction's sign code prior to signing a lease, especially if you're looking for a location or looking at a location that's off the street, tucked away without much visibility. Jurisdictions often strictly regulate signage and types of signage that you're permitted. If your business relies strictly on pass-by traffic and you're tucked away back into a strip mall with limited visibility, you will want to know how you can advertise your location. Sometimes there will be room on a center monument sign. You'll want to consult with the property owner and make sure that there's room for your business on that sign. But you may be thinking about temporary signage, things like sandwich board signs or pennants or banners. And that's when you really need to look at the sign code. Many jurisdictions have limitations placed on the placement of temporary signage, like sandwich boards and pennant flags. And if this is what you rely on to attract your business, you'll want to know what those restrictions are. In Lacey, sandwich board signs are actually restricted to pedestrian-oriented businesses and must be placed within a certain distance of a store entry. I think this is pretty important information to be aware of prior to choosing a location if a sandwich board is going to be one of your main forms of advertising. Additionally, you'll want to take note of any requirements and restrictions for off-premises signs, again, especially if your location is tucked away. In Lacey, we generally don't permit off-premises directional signage. So knowing the sign code or asking a planner about signage restrictions ahead of time can really help you avoid the stress associated with signing what you think is a really great affordable lease and then finding out you can't advertise in a way that is going to help your business succeed. I'll also mention home occupations. If you have a great little business that's just starting up, often opening a home occupation or your business in your home is appropriate and can work until you're ready to move into a storefront. Many occupations really lend themselves to home occupations. Private consulting companies, a single chair hairstylist, custom baker, caterers, general contracting, landscaping businesses. These are just some of the many others that can really work out of your house, especially to start. But you need to make sure you're aware of any jurisdictional requirements related to those. Often regulations for home occupations are in place to ensure that your use doesn't detract from neighborhood characteristics. Uses with many customers that come and visit on a very regular basis, or many customers that come all at once, probably aren't going to be appropriate for home occupations. But if it's something where you have one customer coming at a time every few hours, or you stay in your home and then you travel out of your home to deliver goods or to provide your service, those are things that would really work well out of the home. Often jurisdictions have requirements limiting the amount of space you have in a home that's dedicated to your occupation. A small percentage of the total home area. In Lacey, it's either 400 square feet or 25% of the total floor area of your home can actually be dedicated to your home occupation, whichever of those two is less. There will also likely be restrictions on the number of employees you can have for a home occupation. There will be signage restrictions and then parking changes as well, or parking restrictions as well as restrictions on changes to the exterior of your home. And these are all in place to ensure that your home remains primarily a home and doesn't detract from the character of the neighborhood. Want to ensure that the neighborhood stays a neighborhood and not a business district. Another way to open, especially a small business, another way some people are doing things these days are street merchants. It's another way that jurisdictions allow small business owners to actually get started, although they may be fairly strictly regulated by your local government. So make sure you're aware of any street merchant regulations related to location. In Lacey, there are regulations that restrict street merchants from locating within a certain distance to similar brick and mortar stores. For instance, a taco truck can't locate within a certain distance of another Mexican restaurant because that could potentially become unfair competition to the store owner who has likely invested a significantly more money into their location than the taco truck just starting out. And the same would be true of like a flower stand locating near a flower shop or an ice cream truck locating in the parking lot immediately adjacent to a frozen yogurt or ice cream stand. There may also be some design standards, hours of operation restrictions, and signage standards that you'll want to be aware of, as well as any permitting requirements, because often there are site plan review requirements and other permitting requirements that are necessary for street merchants prior to, so you want to be aware of those prior to moving forward. And as always, just to reiterate, ask a planner, come into the city, find out as much information as you can about where your use might work well, and what types of restrictions you may be facing, and opportunities, find out any other opportunities that the city might be aware of in order for you to move forward.
And actually, Sarah, one thing I would add, especially with food-related businesses and food trucks, and such as the food truck that you showed in the last slide, there's also often other requirements from other agencies, and especially when you're talking about food, the Thurston County Health Department has food safety regulations that are applied uniformly. So at the risk of sounding like I'm trying to do a commercial for that restaurant startup guide and location guide, we do address those specific things for mobile food operators in that guide. So again, it's all about making sure that you're aware of the things that you didn't know before they become a problem. We want to get issues up front so we can address them so they don't become an unpleasant surprise later on.
Absolutely. And the other thing I would just mention is, regardless of whether or not you're locating in a existing commercial space out of your home with a food truck, you're always going to need to have a business license, a state license, as well as a city business license. And those, the state website, which is where you would apply for both your state license and your city license. If you're going into a place that's got some other issues, or if it's a food truck, you're going to be also directed to the city to get some answers to those questions, or to be directed to those other agencies.
And we're very happy to answer questions at any time, whether you call, whether you stop by, whether you visit our website. We really are here to help, and we want to make sure that we help you get off on the right foot. We want to help you stack the deck for success, because our mission here is to help businesses, entrepreneurs to open businesses, and existing businesses that are here to thrive, to be able to grow and expand. So, Tracy, do you have any questions for us at this point?
Yeah, a lot of people, before this presentation, I would think contact a commercial realtor, and then they would hopefully have these this knowledge. Do you guys work really closely with commercial realtors, or is it still best to go through you at some point for those zoning issues?
I think it's probably always safe to confirm with your city planner that your use is allowed in a certain zone. We definitely do have a lot of commercial realtors who contact the city on behalf of their clients. They're working in their client's best interest as well. So if you're working with a commercial realtor, they probably are going to also be looking at these same issues and be aware of some of these same issues, and they potentially will have contacted us as well.
Great. We're very fortunate in this area. We have some really excellent commercial realtors who really know their business, they really know the area, and they also know enough to know when they don't necessarily have exactly the right answer. So it's not at all unusual, as Sarah said, to hear from them. At the same time, whether it's a commercial realtor whether it is or a leasing agent, occasionally there may be something that they just weren't aware of. So that's why we always advise people, talk to a planner. They're friendly, they're knowledgeable, they're not going to, the meter isn't running when you talk to them, so they'll be able to answer questions for you and anticipate some of the questions that you may not have thought to ask.
Yeah. Okay. And so it sounds like kind of some of the biggest challenges you see from small businesses is the lack of planning and the hidden fees and anything like. Are there any last minute things that you see common with small businesses that kind of set themselves up for failure if they don't know about X, Y, or Z?
A couple of things come to mind. When you introduced me before, Tracy, you mentioned my background. Started out as a banker. I was a banker for more than 20 years, and I worked for commercial banks, but they were community banks. They weren't the big banks. And one of the things I loved most about it, and one of the things I love most about being an economic developer, is having the opportunity to work with entrepreneurs. I've never seen, as a group, a more enthusiastic, more can-do group of people in my life, and they brighten every day. At the same time, that can create a blind spot because of the enthusiasm to get going, to have that can-do attitude. Sometimes taking the necessary time to really plan things out. That's why I have such high esteem for the work that the EDC does, working with entrepreneurs to help them to think through the things they don't know and to be able to develop a business plan. Because whether you've got the roadmap of the business plan or not, the obstacles that are going to be out there are still going to be out there. If you've got the business plan, you're going to be able to know where they're going to be so you don't trip over them. And it doesn't become a fatal fall for brand new businesses just getting off the ground. So more than anything else, that is my recommendation. The other thing I would suggest is we weren't just trying to be cute when we came up with the clever name locationlacy.com. We wanted something that would be, would kind of stick in people's minds. I would really suggest people, if they're thinking about going into business, or they're already in business and thinking about a new location, or maybe they're facing a challenge, visit that website. There's a lot of really good useful information there, including links to all of our economic development community partners, including the EDC. And also we can help folks if they're looking for a new location, if they're looking for access to capital, if they're facing some kind of a challenge in their business. If they're looking for information, if they're looking for demographic information in particular, we've got a lot of really useful information. And we try to make sure, that's why we actually set up a standalone website. City websites, whether it's New York or Los Angeles or Seattle or Lacey, we have to be so many things to so many people because we're a city of people. Quite often for entrepreneurs and for business owners, when they're looking for very specific information, they have to wade through so much stuff to be able to find what they're actually seeking. We just pulled all of that off to our separate standalone website, so it's nice and clear, it's nice and clean, it's rather spare. So we made sure, and the discipline that we had to use was to make sure that we had everything that those folks would need and nothing else. So we're not going to clutter it up with pretty pictures or anything like that. We're going to have the information, and we have the information that entrepreneurs and business people are seeking. So I would invite you to go there, and certainly, by all means, call us, and we'll be very happy to help.
Yeah, that really is a great tool. I've seen a lot of demonstrations on the power of that tool, so definitely check that out if you're when you're kind of in that space of looking for locations. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. Please take them up on their offer. If you have questions that weren't answered in today's presentation, reach out to them so that they can help you be successful in your location. Exciting. Was the email wrong?
Yeah.
Oh, what's
the email address actually on that site for me, Sarah Schelling, is in error. If you take off the NG at the end, the email address is actually sschelly, SSCHELLI, at ci.lacey.wa.us.
Okay, we'll get that updated and make sure that's sent out to people so that we have the correct email address for Shelly, or you can give her a call. I'm sorry, Sarah. Well, thank you everybody, and a special thanks to George and Sarah.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.